Hello everyone! Whilst I've been working on my big Jordan Peterson debunk video, something strange came up on Twitter and, well, I want to talk about it. Specifically, it's this account, the Bible Radio app. Now, these are the same people who shared and popularized the clip of Tucker Carlson denying evolution that we talked about the other week, and made it go viral. But as it turns out, they have created a huge array of evolution debunking info cards, and have also been sharing a whole load of very similar cards which come from a Facebook page called Where's the Evolution? Anyway, I thought it would be a good idea to do what any good critical thinker and scientist does and have a look at these cards and see how well they stack up to evidence. Now, all of these cards have the same basic format. They put what they claim is the age of the fossil and the age of the modern animal at the top of the screen. Then they put one fossil and one similar looking modern animal next to each other, often with a claim that these two animals are the same species using the same scientific name, and then they ask, where is the evolution? So, let's have a look through these. The first one of these I saw was of the rhododendron lacebug, a photo of a modern example of which is to the right, and what they claim to be a fossil example of the same species is in amber on the left. Do you see a problem here? Because I already do. The veins of the fossil lacebug are very closely spaced together, and the veins on the wings of the modern rhododendron lacebug are quite widely spaced apart. Now, I have no way to verify that this fossil lacebug was ever assigned an age of 25 million years by a scientist, since reverse image searches haven't got me anywhere on it. But however old it is clearly not the same species as the modern rhododendron lacebug. So how exactly it's evidence against evolution, I have no idea. Now, you're probably thinking, DJ, they can't all be this easy to debunk, right? You didn't even need to do any research to point out that these clearly aren't the same species. Well, fear not, friends. It only gets equally easy from here. The next info card is the one that convinced me to make this video, and this was of a fossil snail, which they claim is 555 million years old. Now that would make the snail a part of the Ediacaran biota, meaning that it would be the oldest true snail ever found. Now, there were snail-like animals that appear in the fossil record about 15 million years after that, but I can't find anything about a fossil snail living 555 million years ago in the scientific literature. And it's not just me who couldn't find anything. This Twitter user challenged them on where this 555 million year age came from, only for them to just straight up admit that they were lying. Now, aren't there scriptures in the Bible about bearing false witness and why it's bad? Bible Radio app? Like, a lot of scriptures about that? But anyway, things get even worse when they finally revealed that their source for this age was a New York Times article which claimed that the oldest known fossil animal was a 555 million year old snail called Kimberella. Now, this is Kimberella. It's a primitive bilaterian, meaning animal with bilateral symmetry, that might have been a mollusk or very closely related to mollusks, though this is debated, but it does appear to have moved like a snail and fed like a snail and had a shell that might or might not have been a precursor to a snail's shell, at least based on skim reading this paper, which I've attached in the description. But even if we assume based on this evidence that Kimberella is an ancestor of snails, it is still radically different to modern snails. The shell is completely different, it didn't have eye stalks, and its mouth was on a sort of tube. So if you want to compare a snail with Kimberella and say, this is the ancestor of a snail, where's the evolution? Well, there it is! A lot of evolution! Okay, so now we get to a butterfly. A butterfly that these people claim is the swallowtail Papilio macaon from 55 million years ago, next to a photograph of a modern Papilio macaon. But there is an incredibly obvious problem here. You see, as you can see, this is an exceptionally preserved butterfly fossil that has pretty much the same outline as the modern swallowtail, but it also preserves pigment that shows it had a completely different pattern to that modern species. After a quick Bing image search for the words fossil butterfly, I discovered that the literal first result was for this specimen. And it's the same image. They literally just searched fossil butterfly, copy-pasted the first result, and then assigned it to a butterfly that was roughly similar from today. Now let's see. Did the scientists who described this specimen assign it to the species Papilio macaon like this info card claims they did? No. According to the site, this specimen was described by pioneering invertebrate paleontologist Samuel Scudder, and was the first fossil butterfly ever found in America. He named it Prodryas persephone, and lepidopterists analysing the specimen have consistently found it to be a member of the Nymphalinae subfamily of the Nymphalidae family, meaning that it would have been much more closely related to the admiral butterflies than to swallowtails. Okay, so they lied about that butterfly being a modern swallowtail, but do you know what else they lied about? The 55 million year age for the specimen. Based on argon-argon radiometric dating of volcanic deposits in that formation, Prodryas persephone was between 34 and 37 million years old, not 55 million years old. That is why I consider these info cards to be fair game for response on this channel. I normally don't when it comes to young Earth creationists out of respect for their beliefs, but these people are demonstrably lying. They're not just blinded by faith, they are changing the facts and lying. Okay, so the next info card, oh no. This one is really, really bad. Okay, so on the left we have a trilobite, and on the right we have a giant isopod. Not only are these things not very closely related at all, with trilobites not thought to be the ancestors of isopods, but there are a ton of differences between them that are really obvious right from the get-go. For example, the trilobite has proportionally much skinnier biramous legs, biramous meaning that partway along their length, each leg divides into two more legs. As far as I'm aware, this is a unique condition to trilobites and possibly their relatives that is not present in any crustaceans. If we flip Triarthros over and look at its top side, we can see that it has a really distinct cephalon or head section, which makes up about a quarter of its body length. Does a giant isopod have that? No! The trilobite's exoskeleton is also divided along its length into 3 segments. Is a giant isopod's? No! Okay, so after a whole load of clearly different animals, we have a fossil that they claim to be an ancient eel, Picaia gracilens. At first, you might look at this and think, oh wow, that does look just like a modern eel. Cool, maybe they have a point. But then you look up Picaia and realize it's actually way more primitive, having no jaws, no bony skeleton, not even a backbone, only a primitive notochord. This is frankly extremely good evidence for evolution, since it shows a number of features typical of later fish, but has no proper fins or skeleton yet. So yeah, you asked where the evolution was? It's here, in the exact image that you posted. So anyway, now that you've sent us a photo that demonstrates evolution and asked where the evolution is, let's have a look at the next one. A primitive platypus? A very primitive platypus? Okay, so this ancient platypus has a very different skull to the modern one, right? Like, before we delve into it and research it, we can see that the Obdurodon's snout is much broader and longer. But let's look further into things. When Obdurodon was first described in this paper, which I've attached in the description, what were the first remains of it that were found? Teeth. Why is this important? Because modern platypuses don't have teeth. Except when they're babies, but these weren't the teeth of a baby platypus. This study by Masakazu Asahara and colleagues, which I've attached in the description, finds that there is evidence for a number of changes evolutionarily between Obdurodon and the modern platypus, with their eyes shrinking over time, and them losing teeth and having a change in bill angle, which is seemingly in order to make room for the electrosensory organ that they developed, which modern platypuses use to find prey. Basically, they found that the skull of the platypus had evolved over time to help it find prey in murky or cloudy water where visibility was restricted, seemingly associated with a change in feeding style from pelagic foraging to bottom foraging. You asked where the evolution is? But the fossils you present are fossils that have been specifically used to demonstrate and study evolution. There is the evolution. We're roughly halfway through the episode, everyone. You know what that means? It's time for our weekly game of Rockman. What's Rockman, for those who don't know? This is Rockman. Rockman is the sentient weapon which I will use to overthrow planet Earth. These letters are a geological phrase, which is also a summoning spell to bring Rockman to life. If you guess all of the letters before I can complete Rockman, you can undo the spell and stop me from taking over the world. But each letter you get wrong is another rock on Rockman. Every week, you guys write letters in the comments, and the most upvoted letter gets put on the board. The most upvoted letter in the last video, which failed so cataclysmically to get many views, but the most upvoted letter has one vote, was W. So, is W on the board, or is a rock going on Rockman? No, W is not on the board, which means the first rock goes on Rockman. And my first victory has been made. Can you stop me from bringing about the rise of Rockman? Write your letters in the comments below and upvote the letter you think is most likely to win you victory. Back to the rest of the video. Okay, so here we have what they claim to be a 54 million year old example of the modern green gecko, Nautilus elegans. Is it? No! This is an exceptionally preserved fossil gecko from northeast Russia, which was described in this 2005 paper by Aaron Bauer and colleagues. They did, to this meme's credit, find that it had a lot in common with modern geckos with toe pads, and was basically a fairly typical member of that group. Though they weren't able to say precisely which lineage of modern geckos it was most closely related to. So a young Earth creationist might look at this 54-million-year-old gecko and say, aha! Evolution can't be real if that means that green geckos have hardly changed in all that time. But that completely fails to take into account that we have so many transitional fossils in every other lineage, and the fact that one of the key factors in evolution is that it's driven by selection pressures in an environment. If being a green grippy-toed gecko works for you as a means of surviving, and there are no selection pressures that might give aspects of your morphology a disadvantage or an advantage, then you're not going to change very much. What I'm saying is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and that's a rule that applies very well to evolution. Plus, the fact that these geckos have grippy toe pads, whilst other geckos don't, tells us that selection pressures must have acted on the ancestors of a subset of geckos that caused them to evolve to need to climb up trees, possibly to avoid a ground-dwelling predator, or to avoid periodic flooding, and that those with grippier toes would have an advantage in surviving over geckos without these grippy toes. So what I'm getting at here is that modern geckos are a fantastic piece of evidence for evolution. We now have yet another example of these guys just flat out lying with their claim that this world-famous dinosaur tail fossil found in amber was from a modern feather-tail glider. Their evidence? Look, this tail has feathers on it! Why am I accusing them of lying here? Well, not only was this a massive news story, but there's a great free-to-read study describing it, which I've attached in the description, which looks at the feather structure and the bones, and all of the authors concluded that this tail is definitely from a Coelurosaurian dinosaur. And you know what makes this even worse? The feather tail glider, which they compare this with because of the feathers on the tail, doesn't have feather-like filaments on its tail. It's named because its tail is shaped like a feather. Okay, so we've demonstrated now that these guys are pathological liars, and the next one also demonstrates this, because you can literally see that these are not the same type of ray. Like, the fossilized ray has a pointed snout and a chunky tail, kind of like the tail of a guitarfish, but the ray that they inexplicably claim is the same species has a rounded snout and a long skinny tail. If they wanted evidence for one species of ray existing for tens of millions of years, they could at least have picked two rays that actually look similar to each other. Okay, so this time they found two animals that actually are similar to each other, a modern gharial and an extinct Dirosaurus, which was a type of Tethyssuchian. This has been consistently found to be the case through phylogenetic analysis and a whole host of different studies, but I really can't be bothered to go into them because this is another classic, well-known example of convergent evolution. They gained skinny snouts with pointy teeth to help catch slippery fish. Just looking at the skull on the left, you can clearly see that it is a lot more flat than the modern gharial, and that its eyes probably would have had better binocular vision. These are clearly not the same animal. Next we see a walrus skull, which they claim is 2 million years old, and 2 million years isn't really that long, like in the grand scheme of the fossil record. I'm perfectly happy for there to have been walruses around 2 million years ago that weren't that different from ones around now. I don't even know why the idea of a 2 million year old walrus that looks very similar to a modern one is supposed to be a gotcha. If this had been 10 million years plus, I might get it. But this is just weird to use something from such a short time frame. Okay, so next we have the skeleton of a bird, which has been mineralized and exceptionally preserved to the degree that it actually has soft eye tissue. Now, to their credit, this is true, and they even get the age right for the specimen based on the paper discussing it. So, why do I still think that this is clearly still evidence for evolution? Well, this is an enantiornithine bird, not a direct ancestor of modern birds, and it doesn't have a beak. We can't really see this specimen's head particularly clearly in the images in this paper, but here's the skull from a very close relative of this specimen, which is also from early Cretaceous China, from a study by Zhang et al., which I've attached in the description. And as you can see, these animals looked just like modern birds, which they were very closely related to, but they're older and they didn't have beaks, which is very strong evidence that modern beaked birds evolved from a toothy ancestor similar to these guys. So you say, where's the evolution? There's your fricking evolution. Okay, so I feel like I'm slowly losing my mind, but we'll try to get through a few more of these before I give up out of anger. Okay, so before I completely lose my mind, we'll go over a couple more. The next one is an ammonite with evolute coiling and ribbing, compared with a nautiloid that has a smooth shell and involute coiling. These are clearly not the same animal, and clearly have evolved different shell morphologies from different selection pressures. Now I could just keep going on and on and on, like how in this example they show a Jurassic calligrammatid lacewing next to an owl moth. This is one of the all-time classic examples of convergent evolution that I suspect many of you will probably have learnt about in biology class. Or I could maybe go into how these two skulls they show here are so radically different that I have no idea why they would try to present one as an ancestor to another and argue that no evolution happened. But I think we've gone far enough. If you want me to subject myself to the mental torture of going through more of these, I'm happy to. But frankly, about 3/4 of the way through this debunk, I felt like my brain was melting into soup in sheer shock at how blatantly wrong every single one of these cards is. And trust me, there are so many more of these. So, if you want me to cover more of them in a future episode, maybe I will, but in the meantime, I want to focus on something way more interesting and educational. So, my next video will be about a topic in hard rock geology and geophysics. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to show your appreciation by liking, subscribing, ringing the little bell icon and sharing it around. And remember to put in your guess for the next episode of Rockman. Remember that you can always support the channel on Patreon, and in doing so you'll get videos a day early, and previews, and a chance to vote on future artworks and future videos. Though for the time being, I'm trying to focus on one particularly big project, so voting won't be back up for about a month. Or you can support us via one-time donation on Ko-fi if you want to. Huge thanks go out to our wonderful Patreon supporters, Jean and Eric Feenstra. It really means a lot that you still support the channel. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.